At some point, your ancestors stopped leaving the dead behind. They dug into the earth, not for food, shelter, or safety, but for someone who was already gone. They placed bodies inside carefully, as if the person still deserved protection from the world. They covered them with stones, tools, pigment, and sometimes flowers, turning dirt into meaning. And after all that effort, they walked away from the grave, but not from the memory. Think about how strange that is, because from a survival point of view, this makes almost no sense. A dead body cannot hunt, protect the group, raise children, or help anyone survive winter. It also cannot bring snacks back to camp, which, scientifically speaking, is very disappointing. So why would early humans spend time, energy, and danger caring for someone who was already gone? The answer is not just about death. It is about what the living were starting to understand. It may be about the moment humans stopped only surviving and started becoming human. For most animals, death is simple, brutal, and usually followed by movement. Even intelligent animals, like elephants and chimpanzees, sometimes show grief and stay near the dead. But eventually they leave, because nature does not wait politely for anyone. Humans did something different. They stopped, looked back, and refused to treat the dead like nothing. We did not just notice death. We built places, rituals, and memories around it. Long before cities, writing, farming, money, or laws, the dead were already there first. One possible ancient burial site is Cima de los Huesos, a cave in Spain. The name means pit of bones, which is already not exactly a comforting place to begin. Deep inside that cave, archaeologists found the remains of at least 28 ancient humans. They were far underground, in a place that required effort, planning, and light to reach. And beside them was a beautiful red stone hand axe, later nicknamed Excalibur. Maybe it was dropped by accident. Maybe it was symbolic. Or maybe someone placed it there on purpose. If it was placed there, then the object was not for the body. It was for the living. That is the problem with archaeology. It is not a time machine. It is a very old crime scene. Bodies can fall, bones can move, floods can rearrange things, and caves can collapse. So burial is not just about finding bones underground. Burial is about finding intention. At Kafsa and school, ancient humans were buried in ways that looked much more deliberate. Some bodies were placed carefully, and some were covered with red ochre, a pigment the color of blood. Maybe red ochre meant blood, life, transformation, or maybe it was simply beautiful. Either way, they were not just removing a corpse, they were making a statement. This was not waste, not meat, and not something to abandon. This was someone. And once you understand that, burial becomes one of the strangest inventions in human history. Because there was no invoice, no thank you, no useful cave review, just effort. The practical explanation is simple. Bodies rot, attract predators, and may spread disease. But practical disposal does not explain the care, the objects, the pigment, or the position of the body. And the most haunting evidence comes from children, because grief becomes impossible to ignore there. At Sunghir in Russia, archaeologists found 2 children buried more than 30,000 years ago. Around them were thousands of ivory beads, spears made from mammoth tusk, carvings, and ornaments. Each bead had to be cut, shaped, drilled, polished, and made by hand. Then, those objects were placed in the grave forever, never to be used by the living. From survival logic, this is insane. From human grief, it makes perfect sense. Because grief does not care about efficiency, schedules, or whether the tribe has better things to do. A dead child could not use those beads, but the living could say, this child mattered. That may be what burial really was. Not a gift to the dead, but a message from the living. To bury someone, you need to understand that a body and a person are not exactly the same thing. The body is there, still and visible, but the person you knew is gone. And once humans noticed that gap, the questions began. Where did they go? And are they still part of us? These questions may be older than temples, older than myths, and older than gods with names. Before humans built churches, they built graves. And maybe graves were the first sacred places. No priest, no book, no official ceremony package, just people, dirt, and one impossible question. Where did they go? Because death creates a problem the brain does not know how to solve. You still know their face, still remember their voice, and still expect them to be nearby. Maybe that is why humans buried the dead. Memory needed a place to go. A grave became a location for grief, a place where invisible pain could stand still. It gave the living somewhere to stand, somewhere to return, and somewhere to point. Once you mark a grave, you also create a connection between people, memory, and land. The dead become ancestors, and the ancestors become part of the group's identity. A hill, cave, or valley stops being just geography and becomes a memory map. This is where our people are, and that sentence can hold an entire civilization together. Humans are the animal that lives with ghosts. Not necessarily supernatural ghosts, but memory ghosts. Your name, family, traditions, and stories are all built from people who are no longer here. That is the strange human ability, treating people who are gone as if they still matter. Maybe this is how a life continues, not in the body, but inside other people's memories. That idea can create love, duty, fear, religion, monuments, and even war, all from one impossible thought. A person can be gone and still remain. Burial may show that humans understood not only death, but themselves. Life was no longer just movement, breathing, eating, or walking around. That is not only biology, that is meaning. A bone, a cave wall, and red dirt could become more than objects. Everything could stand for something else, and the world became readable. We were no longer just surviving the world, we were interpreting it. So why did humans start burying their dead? Maybe for hygiene, protection, predators, spirits, or belief in another world. But underneath all of that is something quieter and much more human. They buried the dead because they still saw a person where biology saw only a body. We know death is real, but we behave like love argues with it. We cover the dead, mark their names, bring flowers, keep photographs, and tell stories. We act like remembering someone is a way of keeping them slightly alive. Your ancestors did not have writing, cities, science, or clear answers, but at some point they stood over a body and understood something no creature was supposed to understand. This was someone. And maybe that is where humanity began. Not when we made tools, not when we made fire, and not when we learned to hunt, but when we looked at someone who was gone and decided they still belonged to us.